When rules are being written and laws are being made, they're being made by people sitting there in this time and place. And there's no one advocating for the startups that haven't been founded, the founders that maybe haven't even been born, in the industries that don't exist. So we founded the Abundance Institute to be a type of nonprofit government affairs and public relations for the future. And one of the things that gave us confidence in doing this was groups like Mackinac. When we said we are going to fight the worst threats from Washington, D.C. and state capitals across the country, we're going to fight the worst threats to the future. Knowing that organizations like Mackinac, the team that Joe has built, exist, gave us a ton of confidence that we can have national impact as a very small team on a mission that sometimes feels quixotic. So thank you to the Mackinac Center for everything you've done and for the invitation today. And thank you for coming this morning. You could have been anywhere doing anything, and Joe convinced you to show up and listen to me talk about AI, which is what I plan to talk about for a while. But before I do that, I want to jump into something a little different. When I was a kid, maybe you all were the same, but I loved riding my bike. There was something magical about it. It was the speed, the way the world opened up when I pushed just a little harder on the pedals. Maybe it was the wind in my hair. The freedom, right? For a kid from the west side of Cincinnati, it was the closest thing to independence that I had for most of my childhood, aside from the number 33 Metro bus that had its stop at the end of my street. Because of my bike, I was able to broaden my horizons. I was able to go places that I probably couldn't have, or maybe my parents didn't want me to go. And I was able to experience the world in a vastly different way than if I had just tried to walk everywhere. Now, years later, and some years ago, I came across a story that gave me both an entirely new perspective on the bike, but has also been a mental model I've used quite a bit in the way I like to think about technology. You see, there was this study done. This was done in the 70s. I discovered it way later, but there was a study done that ranked animals by efficiency of motion, how much energy it took them to reach certain speeds across a certain distance. And some of you are smiling. You probably know this story, right? They ranked basically every mammal, and the condor came in first, right? It's the largest flying bird. Came in first. Very, very efficient. Now humans, us, we ranked embarrassingly low. Like, I'm surprised, right? When I heard this, I was like, you mean to tell me, like, I've watched Usain Bolt, right? Like, humans seem fast, right? No. We ranked, like, at best, bottom third, right? After all, like, just look at us. We're a little slow, clumsy. We're inefficient. We're not really built for running in the way that other animals were designed to move. It's kind of embarrassing to think about. We are who we are, and yet, nearly every other animal is somehow better at us than this. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But then some enterprising researcher decided to do another test on top of this, as I'm sure you all know. They put a human on a bicycle. And suddenly we leapt to the top. Number one, we beat the condor. More efficient, faster than the condor on a bike, right? Because after all, as a species, we're tool makers. And with a simple tool, 2 wheels, some gears, a little bit of metal, we weren't weak anymore. We were limitless, right? And that's why in the 1980s, when Steve Jobs was introducing the Macintosh, he described it, as I'm sure many of you have heard this before, the computer as the bicycle for the mind. Now, that idea has stuck with me ever since I first heard it. And for a couple of reasons, but primarily, for me at least, this is the best description of what I believe technology is supposed to do. It takes our natural limits and it transforms them into something extraordinary. So today I'm going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. And I want to challenge all of you to think about AI in the same way. Not as a replacement for human intelligence, not as a replacement for humans at all. In fact, not even a threat to who we are. But instead, I want you to think of it as the next bicycle. A bicycle not just for the mind, but for our society, for our economy, and for our future. And when you think about bicycles in this way, you start to see them everywhere. History is full of these tools and discoveries. You can go all the way back. Fire, the first force multiplier, right? Took us out of caves and helped us become the modern tool makers that we are. The printing press, a bicycle for knowledge. It allowed us to take our own ideas and be able to communicate and extend them far beyond our ability to speak or write with our hands. Electricity, a bicycle for industry, allowing us to build entirely new worlds that we had never dreamed of before. In the internet, a bicycle for connection, allowing us to connect, engage, and communicate with people in ways that shouting just couldn't get it done. And if there's a city, look, I'm not from Michigan. I married into a Michigan family. I was telling Jarrett this. I grew up in Ohio, like I said, Cincinnati. And I inadvertently married into a University of Michigan family. Actually, my first dog was named Maisie Blue. My wife went to Michigan. Yeah, my wife went to Michigan. Everyone in her uncle played for Bo Schembechler. Lloyd Carr was actually his position coach. So although this isn't home for me, it certainly does feel like home. And I can't help but think when I think about this idea of the bicycle, that if there's any city that knows what happens when humans embrace locomotion, it's Detroit, right? And the automobile just didn't make humans faster. That's not the impact it had. It redefined how we live, how we work, how we dream. Families spread out. This was not the case for everyone in previous generations. Cities reshaped themselves as a result of the car. And a new middle class was built across the country on the backbone of the factories that started in this city. And we stand on another threshold, right? AI today is where the car was in the early 1900s, right? It's clunky, a little misunderstood, somehow both over and underestimated at the exact same time, but brimming with power, right? The power to change everything. But we have a problem, and that's most people do not view AI the way I described it, as a bicycle. Instead, most people view it as a monster, right? Some sort of alien technology that was just dropped on Earth one day. We all woke up, and here it was. Here it is, AI. And we read about these stories, right? Stories of job loss, about robots taking over, about existential doom. Now we're even hearing stories about AI driving people insane, right? Yeah, AI is not perfect. No tool is perfect. And people are going to make mistakes, especially when it's new and it's strange. But here's a simple truth about it. AI is just a tool. And before we get into that, I want to step back just a little bit. What is AI really, right? At its core, AI is just math, statistics. It's algorithms trained on enormous amounts of data. It doesn't think like we do. It doesn't feel like we do. In fact, it doesn't think or feel at all. It predicts. It takes patterns it's seen before and it predicts what comes next. That's why it can write sentences. For those of you who have used it, that's why it can create sentences. It is just guessing, essentially, at what the sentence should be. That's why it can recognize a tumor on a scan. That's why it can design a protein. Really, after all, AI is just prediction at scale. But this is where it gets really exciting. Because if you stack enough of these predictions on top of each other, you get something that feels like reasoning. Something that starts to look like creativity. It's not quite human. It's not alien. But it's profoundly useful. And what can it become? Well, let's think back to one of these other bicycles I just mentioned. Let's talk about the early days of electricity. At first, it was just a light bulb. That's it. And then it was a motor, and then it became refrigeration, communication, air conditioning, and now transportation. Whole new industries built on a force that most people today still don't fully understand. And again, AI is no different than these other tools. Today it can write text, it can answer questions, it can generate images, it can make music. Tomorrow, it'll be designing new medicines, optimizing our energy grid, tutoring our kids, translating between languages. We just saw this with Apple. You can now, the new generation of AirPods, you and another person can both put your AirPods in, speak totally different languages and still communicate in real time. This is AI at work today. And it can even translate between disciplines of science. So think about something like agriculture and genetics. AI can help us connect the dots to grow more food using less water. Or engineering and medicine. AI can help engineers and surgeons design new tools to help heal us faster. Or energy and chemistry. AI will be an unlocking tool to help us design materials for the next generation of batteries or even the future of nuclear energy. And that's what I mean really by bridging disciplines. This isn't a theoretical exercise. These are practical breakthroughs that will touch all of our lives. And that's why it's just a tool. Just like fire, just like electricity, just like the bicycle. It's something we can build, we can harness, shape, and ride into the future. So let's think about this, some of the things I've already mentioned. Think of a doctor who could scan thousands of images in seconds, catching cancers earlier than ever before. Or a small business owner who now finally has access to insights that were once reserved for only the largest corporations with armies of analysts or endless budgets for consultants. Or students who can learn at their own pace, anytime, anywhere, with a tutor that never gets tired or never loses its patience. Or healthcare. So Google has developed an AI-assisted ultrasound tool. Now, traditionally, sonograms require years of training. But this system, with it, someone with little to almost no training can produce accurate, clear scans. And these scans are important. After all, almost every signal we use for the health of babies in utero is based on these scans. So imagine what this means. This is prenatal health care anywhere it's needed. Rural villages, underserved communities, we no longer have to make impossible trade-offs based on shortages of doctors and nurses. And this isn't science fiction. This is happening right now. Or take science itself, for that matter. For decades, predicting how proteins fold was one of biology's hardest challenges. This is how we understand how medicine works. Now, a PhD student might spend their entire dissertation mapping a single fold. Then came DeepMind's AlphaFold. And in 18 months, it solved the structure of nearly every known protein. 214 million of them. And here's the thing, it didn't advance biology by years, it advanced it by centuries. One leading scientist I talked to about this said it was like compressing 1,800 years of progress into a year and a half. So scientists are no longer at a point where we're trying to map proteins. We're designing them. And these are not far off dreams. They're here. And they're bicycles carrying us further, faster, and with less effort than we could have ever imagined. For me, the real risk isn't that AI doesn't do too much in our world. I have grave concerns that we don't let it do enough. And it brings us to the choices we have in front of us today, right? We can choose one of two paths, and we've been given them when it comes to our public policy approaches. We can choose a fear-driven path, one that says pause the technology, build guardrails everywhere, create endless red tape, take the path of saying stop pedaling, slow down, let's wait. Or we could take one of confidence, one of permissionless innovation, one of experimentation, wide access, the path that says get on and let's ride into the future. Now imagine if in 1905, let's go back, 1905, what if someone had said, these new automobiles, they're far too dangerous. Let's ban them until we can figure out every possible risk and solve for them. America have built an economy that runs on wheels. Now we say, oh, that was England. That was not the approach America took. But we almost did, right? Yes, but we went the other way. There were risks, there were accidents, but we didn't shackle the automobile to the pace of a man. We allowed it to grow, to improve, to mature into something that reshaped our world. And in the US, we almost went the way of England. In those early days, and you can go back, a project we have at the Abundance Institute is this project called the Pessimist Archives, where we collect stories of technological panics in history. And this includes things like the autonomous elevator, the radios, and even, yes, the automobile. Every speeding incident in those early days was a national story. Every accident was a national story. In fact, in 1899, one of the first drivers was arrested for speeding in New York. It's at least one of the earliest stories we could find. They were clocked at a shocking speed, 12 miles an hour. 12, right? And the newspapers went wild. You read these stories. There were open conversations, policymakers being quoted and questioning whether cars should even be allowed in cities at all. But America knew better. We recognized that the risks of cars were real, but that stopping cars was a greater risk. And because we chose progress over fear, Detroit rose, a whole new economy was born. And there are other examples to this. This isn't just the automobile, the internet, right, in the 1990s. Back then, when the internet was launched, Europe chose a very European approach, right? They said this is far too risky, we don't understand it. They applied heavy precaution, heavy regulation, burdensome restrictions on startups. They said, look, we need to understand every possible danger, and we can only move forward until we know how to manage it. But again, America chose a different path. We protected experimentation. We allowed new companies to scale without being strangled by liability. We opened up new markets, took a light touch approach. We embraced permissionless innovation. And what happened? We have a very real world natural experiment. For the next 3 decades, the global economy was built here. Not in Brussels, not in Paris, not in Beijing. Here, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, trillions of dollars in value, millions of jobs, and a cultural transformation that touched every corner of the globe. Because when we faced fear, we chose to ride. And again, we are at this exact same crossroads. In some ways, AI is the first real commercial application of the internet, aside from perhaps email and social media. And just like the car, just like the internet, the decisions we make in the next few years, whether we open doors or close them, will determine whether America leads the world or whether we watch this one from the sidelines. Look, we can bring this a little closer to home. At least I'll bring it a little closer to home for me. I have 7 kids. My oldest is 10. I have lots of little kids in my house. And like most parents, I spend a lot of time watching how they play, how they learn, how they explore the world. And I'm just amazed. I'll tell you a couple of examples. My son Henry, he's our oldest, 10 years old. And he's got this this newfound passion for performance. He could take the sock off his foot and turn it into a Tony Award winning puppet show, 2-act play, beginning to end. It's real creativity. I'll tell you, it's real creativity. And with AI, he's already asking me to do this. He can bring these puppet shows to life, right? He can start to turn them into animations. He can create new voices. He can make little movies, soundtracks. He's doing this. My second oldest, Daniel, he loves sports. And he's obsessed with stats. And I think that's mostly because he sees that I'm obsessed with sports and love stats. But he'll sit with me for hours and just listen to me talk about ERAs, QB ratings, stats, and he's nodding along, playing along. But he's starting to try new things. And with AI, he's actually trying to analyze games. He wants to be a major league scout, right? Running his own simulations, drawing up insights, even creating new plays out of nothing for teams that we're watching. And my daughter, Caroline, she's 6. She loves hockey. All my oldest kids play hockey, and she loves hockey. She's precocious. She's got these little blue earrings and a braid down the side, but she's an absolute tornado. I've coached her for a number of years. It's probably the last year I'll coach her, but you can't check at that age. It's not allowed. But what she realized is she never actually had to learn how to stop skating if there was always a little boy to break her fall. And so she's just absolute hell on skates. And with AI, individual coaching is expensive. Very, very expensive to find an individual skating coach. But with AI, we can work on personalized drills, right? We can get her coaching feedback, right? We can even help her visualize her progress, right? So at 7, she's 7 years old now. She's on an all-girls travel hockey team, but she still loves playing on her co-ed team. I think she really likes beating up on the boys, but she really loves her co-ed team. And the moment she walked out on the ice, the practice has just started this week. The moment she walked out on the ice, you could see the little boys, the fear in their eyes as this little pink helmet popped up above the boards. But these are just a few small examples. But it reminds me really of what's at stake. This isn't about abstract policy debates. This isn't even about far-flung breakthroughs like some of the ones I've mentioned. These are about kids like mine, right? Kids like yours, right? And creating a world with more possibilities rather than less. So let's circle back. And I want to spend some time doing Q&A. I think this is a topic I love talking to people about. So I'll wrap here in a moment, and then we'll dive into the questions, Joe. But let's circle back. Humans on our own, we're not the fastest, we're not the strongest, but we're tool makers. And if you give us the right tools, give a human a bicycle, and we can outrun the condor. And Steve Jobs was right. The computer is the bicycle for the mind. And as I said in the beginning, AI is even more than that. AI is the bicycle for our future. It's a tool to democratize intelligence, access to information. It's a tool that could lift families out of poverty, unleash entrepreneurs, cure diseases, modernize our government, expand what it means to live a life of material abundance. But the question isn't whether this bicycle exists. It exists. It is here. The question is whether we, as a society, we in the United States, will choose to climb on, or whether we'll let fear keep us standing still. And I think at this point, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. I believe we should ride that bike, right? I believe we should ride it boldly, together. I think we can use this as a tool to build a future worthy of our past, worthy of our children. Thank you.
All right, we've got some note cards on you can write down some questions. I think we'll have Nathan walk around and grab these. I'll start off with a question while you finish writing those and we gather them up. So first of all, thanks for coming, Chris. Great to hear you have 7 kids, 10 and under. Now I know why he was so excited to come out here and speak. Responded right away. Yeah, I'll be there, anywhere. So a question I have, a little provocative one to start you off. So there's a lot of ways you've been very persuasive about how this makes our life so much easier, some of the things that it can do. A lot about building resiliency is doing difficult things and having to overcome them. So where do humans turn to find this resiliency if AI is going to make our lives so much better in so many ways?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to think about sort of resiliency, intellectual resiliency, or what have you in the context of AI. Just because you can use AI to do things doesn't mean you should. And maybe I'll give you a different example. The microwave, right? Like, I'm assuming all of you have a microwave in your kitchen. How many of you have cooked a Thanksgiving turkey in your microwave? None of you? Not a single person. You can do it. You could put the turkey in the microwave and crank that sucker for 4 hours or however long, and you get an edible turkey that will not kill you, but you don't get that classic crispy skin Thanksgiving turkey, right? And I think people understand this about tools, that just because you can use it for something doesn't mean you should. It's not always the right tool for the task. And so I think in the same way, thinking about AI as a tool means that there are things that it will certainly make better, but that doesn't mean that we should use it for everything. And I think we're kind of at that stage with artificial intelligence now. Like, they were early on, I'm sure. Maybe some of you have seen these. Maybe some of you have owned these. But at one point in time, there were companies that were selling, like Westinghouse was selling entire cookbooks for the microwave. You could do everything with it. It's the one-size-fits-all machine of the future. But we knew better, right? And I think in the same ways, like, you don't want life to be like a microwaved Thanksgiving turkey. And I think most people will recognize this as we become more accustomed to understanding what it does well and what it doesn't do well in the coming years. I think we'll find a nice balance between this sort of it can do everything to like well placed roles for this technology in our future.
We got 2 or 3 questions kind of along the same line, which is, what's this effect going to be on jobs? So if AI can be used to replace workers, what are they going to go do? And should we worry about these job reductions from AI?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of ways to think about job displacement in the context of artificial intelligence. And I think, like, again, I talked about DeepMind's AlphaFold, right? You can sort of hear the screech of thousands of biology PhDs that might never come to fruition as a result of AlphaFold sort of moving into this space and advancing knowledge in a way that we thought PhDs had to. There are certainly jobs that will be transformed by artificial intelligence, and I think this is sort of the concept of economics of complements and substitutes. In some ways, yes, certainly AI will substitute certain jobs. In some ways, it will complement others. And if you look sort of historically at sort of the intersection of technology and jobs, you can say, at least as long as we've been trying to measure it, about every 75 years, roughly half of all the jobs become something totally different. If you were to go back 75 years ago, half of the jobs that existed 75 years ago do not exist today. You go 75 years before that, the same thing. 75 years before that, the same thing. And this has always been an ongoing process. An example I would give of sort of like jobs and technology is the ATM. Right? If you think like, what does the AT in ATM stand for? It's automated tellers. The whole idea was this is an automated bank teller. You can come and have a computer do essentially what a human was doing. Two things. One, it didn't actually, if you look at the numbers, the proliferation of ATMs actually moves hand in hand with increases in the number of jobs in banks, in branch jobs in bank branches. Right? The role that those humans played in those branches actually changed, right? Like you walk into a bank now and they're not called tellers, they're called something like customer service or relationship managers or something like this. It actually allowed them to do something different. Instead of just counting bills for you, they're now helping you open up a new credit account, they're helping you do other things. So I do think there are ways to think about sort of the way that this will certainly displace some jobs, but will likely not cause the types of structural unemployment people have always feared in terms of technological growth.
Well, we are a public policy think tank, so you open talking about and through your talk about policy changes that would stand in way of this. What is legislation out there, good and bad, that's being talked about that you think lawmakers should pursue or you should avoid? And I bring this up, there was a hearing on AI legislation yesterday here in Michigan on a bill, a couple of bills, but one that would be pretty restrictive to a lot of AI companies operating. Yeah,
and I think that there are proposals in Michigan just like there are in New York, in California, in Colorado. I would sort of put AI policy in sort of two, maybe three groups. There's a whole host of AI policies that are designed for sort of European style government pre-approval of the technology. So this is sort of California and Colorado in particular are the leaders in this space. And what their intended outcome is that the technology is presumed dangerous unless proven safe. And innovators, entrepreneurs, companies will have to do all sorts of very expensive, very burdensome, sometimes even impossible work to prove that their models are safe. And as a result, you'll end up with, in that case, you'll end up with just a couple of very large, very well-funded startups that can survive that process. But in many ways, that's what most of those policymakers want. They want 1, 2, maybe 3 players that they can deal with most specifically, because it isn't just about regulating the technology, it's about controlling the ideas. This is mostly what they want in some form or fashion, is to make sure that only approved and totally acceptable ideas are sort of shared on these systems. There's some in the middle that are sort of a mix, that you have sort of like a mix of red states and blue states that are sort of well-intentioned but still misaligned to sort of the needs that a very fast-growing innovative space would require, right? Like every rule that they write is a snapshot of sort of the day as it exists. 3-4 years from now, this won't be the case. Some of these are like, well, we only want to regulate the largest models, and so we're going to set compute thresholds very, very high. We did this actually in the United States inadvertently. During the Cold War, we restricted the export of computers based on how powerful they were. In the late 1990s, Apple had to get the export controls changed because the laptops, the Macintosh, actually became so powerful that they actually inadvertently fell into the definition of a munition, and actually had to be redefine the entire system. I think the pace of change is happening so fast that you're not going to have 30-year-old laws causing this. You're going to have 3-year-old laws causing this. And then the last is there are some states, I'm biased because, maybe I helped with it, but Utah has what's called a learning lab. And a number of states have proposed something similar, which is an opportunity for the legislature to take a beat, learn more about this space, and actually try to evaluate what laws exist that are out of date and how to update them, as opposed to trying to write new ones just to match the time where it is. So I think those are sort of the three classes. And the federal government is totally schizophrenic on this. 18 months ago, they wanted to ban it. Now it's totally it's the centerpiece of everything, and you have like congressional from Ted Cruz on one side to there's some legislators in Illinois in particular on the other that have almost completely different views, and both bills seem to be moving. So I'm not sure where we'll end up at the federal level, but that seems to be where things are right now.
We had a couple questions about kids. So what's your thoughts on, you have kids that are going to be growing up in this world where they're kind of absorbed by technology and all these different tools. Is there a role for lawmakers in that? Or even if there's not a role for lawmakers, do you have any predictions or thoughts on how kids will adjust to all this technology?
Yeah, so I'll answer both pieces. Is there a role for lawmakers? I think that there is an open and ongoing conversation about the use of technology in schools, and in particular in public schools. Like, lawmakers certainly have some role to play in what policies and procedures exist in public schools. Do I want policymakers replacing me in deciding what, when, and how my kids engage with a particular type of technology? No. Right, so I think it's sort of in the context of sort of what we're talking about. But I think a lot of these laws right now, in terms of age verification and some of these other things, are going to have vastly negative and unintended consequences for the future of the internet. That I think we'll look back and realize they were a lot of these were mistakes. Now, to the other question, how do I think kids will adopt to this technology? So Douglas Adams, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, has this great quote. I'm going to butcher it. So this is not exactly how it goes, but it goes something like this: when a new technology is introduced, if you're over the age of 40, it's ungodly, unholy, and against the natural order of things. If you're between the ages of 20 and 40, it's something new and exciting, and you could possibly make a career out of it, and it's something worth playing around with. And if you're under the age of 20, it's just the way the world has always been. And I think you look at the conversations of AI today in the context of, like I mentioned with the pessimist archives, the context of historical techno-panics. Right, these sort of societal panics as a result of the introduction of a new technology, and they're eerily similar, right? The radio, right, to which I don't think there's a single person, at least that I know, that thinks that the radio is like on its own harmful to children. And yet there were conversations, I can think of three distinct. There were conversations early on in the radio that again are very eerily similar to what we hear today. One of them was a headmaster of a boarding school in New England complaining that the radio has sucked the vitality out of all of his boys. All they do in the evenings is lay around in their rooms and listen to these radio shows. And they're no longer engaged in the youthful activities that they once were across the campus. Or there were, in the 1920s, there were real conversations about the role that the radio had played in in sort of the psychological health and even self-harm of kids. These are very real conversations that have played out. I think over time what we learned is these things are complicated and they're not monocausal. And a lot of the conversations we have around kids and AI are no different than almost insert technology here that we've gone back almost every 15, 20 years. The introduction of every new technology, I think, has almost created the same exact conversation over and over and over again.
Yeah, I saw an article once that was like, what was the greatest music of all time, whatever it was, when you were about 20 years old, 15 to 20. Last question, though I know Chris will be around afterwards if you want to come up and ask an individual question or talk to any of our Mackinac Center folks to learn more about what we do. We'd love to have you. Multiple questions about China. Mm-hmm. I really loved how this one was put. China has a lot of bikes. Can they ride faster, farther than the U.S.? Or what should we do?
Yeah, that is true. I think China released a model earlier this year called DeepSeek, which was the breakthrough wasn't its power. It was the ability that they were able to train it to be as complex as it was on the amount of compute. They were basically claiming that they had used far less amount of energy, right? They were basically saying they'd created a faster bike, and it sent sort of a lot of these companies into a bit of a tailspin as they tried to figure out why. I think there's two things here, and this is, I think, was conventional wisdom, may not still be conventional wisdom, but may become conventional wisdom again on China and technology. And that is, China is very good at copying. They're not good at building 0 to 1, right? What China is able to do is take things that exist and build them better, again, faster. They can copy, recreate, and build them faster. And I think there are two things that matter here. One, there's sort of this, every step America takes to slow down the production of its own AI capabilities is an opportunity that we are giving a geopolitical adversary to take the lead. And the pace of change in AI is such that the winners will win faster and the gap will become greater and maybe even perhaps irreversible. And so I think oftentimes you have, folks in Michigan or folks in Tennessee or folks in California thinking about very parochial interests when it comes to AI, and this is a very, very, very global issue. The other thing that I would say in terms of China and the United States is that, like, as it stands today, the U.S. still remains the world's leader in this technology. And so long as we remain committed to our principles, to the free market principles that have enabled entrepreneurs to get exactly where they are today, the U.S. will remain the world's leader in this technology. And so I think it is important. It is of utmost importance that we do not lose sight of those principles, because that is how we unlock the next 100 years of technological growth, and not give it up because we were afraid to ride. So.